Hello everyone, my name is Ian Sprowski and I'm doing my report on crude oil. A little introduction, crude oil is extremely valuable to the world due to the amount of things that it are used in, including fuels, plastics, and transport. It also plays a major role in global economic stability as it is a super valuable resource. Lately, there's been a lot of environmental concerns with fracking and emissions that have come from it and a push towards renewable energy alternatives. Even despite this, though, it still remains vital to the world. From this graph, we can see the crude oil production by the top three countries. United States leads with a little over 20 million barrels a day. And then Saudi Arabia and Russia coming in around a little over 10 million barrels a day. This next graph shows the exporters, top three, and you can see it changed a little bit. Saudi Arabia up over $200 billion in exports, which is a little bit different from the last graph, which just shows that the oil that they are mining, they're exporting instead of keeping it in state. A little overview about Saudi Aramco, which is the world's largest oil producer with around 11 million barrels a day. It operates under full state ownership, which means it's completely backed by the Saudi Arabian government. It also controls the Ghawar field, which is the world's largest oil reserve. And just a little stats, in 2022, they had $161 billion in net income. A little bit behind the Ghawar field is located in eastern province of Saudi Arabia. It's estimated reserves of over 70 billion barrels that are swimming around. It produces roughly 5 million barrels per day, and it really is the backbone of Saudi Arabian energy exports. This is Saudi Aramco's revenue growth from 2018 to 2024. Just shows the big spike in the use of crude oil and how it's so important to the world today. A little bit about the OPEC, which is what Saudi Arabia is a part of. It was founded in 1960 and currently has 13 members, and it's just a group of nations that kind of coordinate oil prices to stabilize markets. All these countries are in either Africa or the Middle East, and it holds roughly 80% of global crude reserves, and Saudi Arabia is basically the leading role in that. The video framework, value, high global demand for crude oil, so obviously it's very valuable. Rarity, there's limited reserves and global access. It's deep down in the ground, so it's pretty hard to get. And it's also not really a renewable resource, so it is very rare. Imitability, it's difficult to replicate other energy sources. I mean, we've been trying with like wind and solar energy, but it isn't as effective as crude oil. And then organization, they have 103 active drilling rigs and are currently surveying new fields in order to try and expand once the Ghawar field does end up running out. Little SWOT summary here, we got the strengths. Their oil reserve is huge. They have 259 billion barrels in reserve. And then, like I said before, it's state backed, so they have funding from the government in case anything goes wrong. Weaknesses, they're heavily dependent on revenue from oil. If the oil market crashes, they're not getting money because they are pretty much entirely in oil. And due to their location in the Middle East, they're also exposed to a lot of political risks just because there's a lot of unease in that area. Opportunities, they can expand into clean energy, which is obviously the way of the future. And so if they can get into that early, it's an opportunity to dominate the market. And there's also growing demand from developing countries, which are kind of catching up with the technologies of the Western civilization, and they're beginning to need more crude oil. Some threats, there's a global push for renewable energy, so obviously their main source of income could become irrelevant in the future. And then potential tariffs and trade barriers are always a threat for any country that's exporting. Sustainability outlook, investing in carbon capture and renewable projects. It's just kind of talking about like the future of the company and how they could start looking for sustainable energy sources to kind of launch them into the future and prevent them from dying out. they're kind of already doing this. Part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, which you can find on their website, talks about economic diversification, and it's pretty much explaining how the country's kind of trying to get away from crude oil as being their main source of exports and imports. And then the company itself, Saudi Aramco, is also focusing on reducing emissions in production chain and trying to get as close to zero emissions as possible. And that kind of rolls into this slide talking about the future outlook. Global energy transition, which basically means going from the crude oil into renewable energy sources. It's obviously going to be devastating for their company, but they kind of are on the cutting edge of this in terms of efficiency and clean technologies. And like I was talking about before, diversifying into other areas so that they don't end up dying out. Import regulations. So whenever they are getting imports, the country is required to provide an invoice, a bill of lading, and a certificate of origin. It's basically just authenticizing all the things that are coming in. They also have a value-added tax of 15% on most goods and services, and the crude oil does fall into this. So there is a 15% tax. Crude oil is part of HS Code 2709, and it is duty-free and tariff exempt. So basically they don't have to pay any tariffs or duties whenever they're sending their product to other countries. All of this is regulated by the ZACA, which is the Zakat Tax and Customs Authority, which is their main authority. And they kind of regulate the Vision 2030 that I was talking about from before. Prices, tariffs, and costs. So the Saudi Aramco has 5 different types of oil. Their main one is the Arab Light, and it's priced at around $63 a barrel. The U.S. imported 294,000 barrels a day in July of 2025, so which equals out to around $574 million. Like I said before, because of HS Code 2709, there is no U.S. import tariffs. And just a little side note, it's pretty, you can't really find the price of Saudi Aramco's barrels because they use regional benchmarks like the Argus Sour and then the Oman Dubai, which currently they're about $2.50 above the Oman Dubai. But it's hard to find that number, so I don't really know exactly what they were, but I based it off of the US's barrel price of about $60, which goes off the Brent crude benchmark, and just kind of based it off of that. Buy versus lease. Owning is preferred just for cost efficiency and control because there's so much barrels of oil going out, and the pricing of an oil rig and the warehouses that are used to store all the barrels, it would just get way too expensive trying to rent all that out. And so I think it's better to buy, along with the fact that the oil market is extremely valuable, and entrusting your oil to other people for like warehousing and stuff like that, you could be getting scammed. So yeah, it reduces theft, liability, and dependency on third parties. And like I was saying before, just leasing the kind of equipment needed to get the oil out of the ground and then store it would be way too high. In conclusion, Saudi Aramco remains a cornerstone of global energy supply. I mean, they're the #1 supplier in the world. They're strong financially, and production capabilities ensure dominance, mostly because they're state-backed by the Saudi Arabian government, along with the fact that there's basically no competitors in Saudi Arabia. They control like 90% to 100% of the oil in the country. So they basically have no competition at all. And then, as I was mentioning throughout the presentation, sustainability efforts will shape future competitiveness as the oil market and industry dies out and switches over to renewable energy. It's all going to hang in the balance of if they are getting into clean energy early and are kind of on the leading edge of that, or if they fall behind and are too late. So that's my presentation. Got my references here. Thank you.